Hi friends, I hope everyone's doing well. I need to replenish my transparent paper stash, so I thought I'd film the process. I'll be using deli paper, which will be monoprinted, and two types of tissue paper, which will be hand painted. I have a similar tutorial on my channel, but the papers I'm making in this video will be different. For these papers, most of the surface will be covered with color. That's different from my previous video with a color-formed small patterns. I'll link that video in the description area if you haven't watched it and want to take a look. Let's start by monoprinting the deli paper. As I pull out the deli paper from the box, I want to talk briefly about why I'm monoprinting the deli paper, but painting the tissue paper. This deli paper only has wax on one side, but the other side isn't the best for applying paint with a brush. I tried and the paint resisted. I get a better paint application by using a gel plate. In my other video, I applied a layer of acrylic medium on the tissue paper before monoprinting it. Overall, I didn't like the texture after applying the paint to the acrylic medium tissue paper, so I won't be doing that step this time. Tissue paper is fragile compared to deli paper. I tried monoprinting it without the layer of acrylic medium, and it tore when I pulled it. That's why I'm painting the tissue paper in this video. I'll talk more about it during that section. I brought out cadmium yellow medium hue and cadmium orange hue for this first deli print because both colors are semi-opaque, which will yield a good transparent ombre color layer. If you haven't created an ombre on a gel plate before, I suggest using at least two brayers, one for each color. You can also have a third brayer to use to blend where the two colors meet if you like. I'm comfortable using only one or two brayers, so that's what you'll see me doing. For these papers, I want a small amount of unpainted deli paper showing through. It adds another element of transparency when using it on top of another paper. I'm using the cardboard that was removed from letter and number stencils to create a mask. This will protect the area on the deli paper that won't have paint. I flattened the crease of the deli papers as much as I could beforehand, but there was still some creasing. I suggest laying the side of the deli paper with the mountain fold towards the gel plate. It's easier to smooth out the crease. Then gently smooth out the deli paper with your fingers and palms of your hands so it touches the paint. Let the deli paper sit on the painted gel plate for about a minute. It helps the paint to adhere to the deli paper. I started doing this step recently after I noticed more paint transferred to the paper. The print turned out well. There's still a good amount of paint left on the gel plate, so I decided to pull another print. I like the uneven look of this print as well. For this next print, I brought out one opaque acrylic paint, bright aqua green, and one semi-opaque, which is light olive green. Even though the bright aqua green is not semi-opaque, I think it'll be transparent enough for how I'll be using this paper. Again, I'm creating an ombre on the gel plate. Instead of using masks, I'm using the cardboard roll to create a design that removes some of the paint. This area will be unpainted on the deli paper. Same process as the previous print. Another good print. Also, there's enough paint still on the gel plate for another print. I like this one as well. Next, I'll be making a print using a single color primary red, which is semi-opaque. I cut a narrow piece of a gift card so I can use it to create a loose plaid pattern. I don't want the lines to be too close together because I want the print to be mostly red paint. I'm cleaning off the gift card in between drawing each line to remove the paint on it. Another good print. Let's see how the second print will look because there isn't much paint left on the plate. The print is faint, but I'll try to use it in a collage. This next print will use primary blue acrylic paint that's semi-opaque. I want to try another print using a cut gift card. This time the pattern will be loose vertical lines. The print looks good and there's enough paint on the plate for one more print. I like the uneven, faded look of this print. I continued to print a few more deli papers. I decided to leave in 4 that have different mask and color combinations to give you a few more design ideas. I'll add music for the rest of this section because the process is the same as the previous prints. I'll come back for the next section, which is painting the tissue papers. I mentioned during the introduction that I'll be using two types of tissue paper. I want to test regular gift tissue paper versus non-bleeding art tissue paper. I want to see if one type of tissue paper is better for this technique or if there's a difference. Also, I won't be applying a layer of acrylic medium before painting, so I want to see if omitting this step matters. I'm starting by doing a side-by-side with both types of tissue paper using the same acrylic paint color. I place the tissue paper on top of the glossy side of freezer paper. In my other video, I placed the tissue paper right on top of the drop cloth on my table. It slowed down the process because I had to wait for the paint to dry before removing the tissue paper. Wet tissue paper is very fragile, so it may tear if it's picked up before it dries. This way, I moved the tissue paper that's on the freezer paper, then continued painting. Also, it's easier to remove the tissue paper from the freezer paper than if I placed it on a regular piece of paper. I'll show how to remove the tissue paper at the end of this video. I'm painting both tissue papers with neutral gray. These are the only papers that will be painted the same color. This is my sample papers to see if I prefer one type of tissue paper over the other. I'm adding more water than I would usually when painting with this color because it's opaque. I want the consistency to be thin enough so the painted tissue paper will be transparent. There didn't seem to be any difference in painting on each tissue paper. The paint applied the same way, and both papers look the same. The art tissue paper has more wrinkles, but I think it's because of how I applied the paint. We'll see if there's any difference when each one is used in a collage, which will be my next video. In this section, I'll be painting gift tissue papers only. I want to use different color paints on each tissue paper going forward. I didn't think it was necessary to paint side-by-side papers as we did with the gray tissue papers. I brought out two colors of fluid acrylic paint for another ombre. These are the only colors I have in fluid acrylic paint. Fortunately, the colors work well together. You only need to add a small amount of water since it's fluid paint. Painting an ombre is similar in a way to monoprinting one. I suggest using at least two brushes, one for each color, and if you want, a third to blend where the colors meet. Since the tissue paper is lightweight and tears easily, I apply the paint with a lighter hand. I'm okay with the paint having a variation of opacity. It has a washy look that will add a nice transparency when layered on top of another paper. For this next paper, I brought out two different red paints, one that's opaque and the other one that's semi-opaque, but instead of an ombre, I'll be painting a loose plaid. Again, apply the paint with a light hand as to not tear the tissue paper, starting with the lighter red for the vertical stripes, then the darker red for the horizontal stripes. I'm applying the darker red while the lighter red stripes are still wet. This technique adds to the transparent loose look of the plaid, but you can certainly let each paint color dry before painting the next color. This is the last gift tissue paper that I'll be painting for this tutorial. I'm using a semi-opaque orange. I love expressive brush marks, so I'm going to cover the majority of the surface with these marks, leaving some of the tissue paper unpainted. I want the brush strokes to have a variety of transparency and a few dry brush strokes as well. Next, I'll be painting on top of art tissue paper. I wanted to paint an ombre on the art tissue paper using opaque and semi-opaque paint to see how this paper will look. I'm changing the color palette so it's not a duplicate of the ombre I painted for the gift tissue paper. I have been gravitating towards this light olive green acrylic paint lately. It pairs well with cool and warm tone colors. Another color I've been gravitating towards is Payne's Gray. It's a beautiful dark value paint color to use if you don't want to use black. As I mentioned in the gift tissue paper section, I love the look of loose expressive marks. I wanted to switch it up for this tissue paper by using a dark value color and creating circular marks, leaving some unpainted areas. Again, varying the opacity of the paint and having some dry brush edges. I can see using this paper with the solid gray tissue papers that I made at the beginning of this tutorial. The final tissue paper will be painted with this semi-opaque dark green paint to make stripes. Since I created a plaid on the gift tissue paper, I thought it'd be good to have just vertical stripes on art tissue paper for my stash. I'm placing the stripes closer together so there's only a small amount of unpainted tissue paper showing. To be honest, this stripe pattern looked a bit boring to me, so I brought out again the light olive green paint. I'm adding narrow stripes of it in the unpainted area and slightly overlapping it onto the dark green. I think adding this color will make the paper look more interesting. Sometimes the tissue paper starts to separate from the freezer paper as it dries, so it's easy to remove, but sometimes it doesn't. Since tissue paper is fragile and tears easily, I want to show how I remove it with minimal or no tearing. I flip the papers over and start removing the top edge of the tissue paper carefully from the freezer paper. Then gently peel the freezer paper up and away from the tissue paper with one hand. My other hand is on the tissue paper and gently removing it from the freezer paper. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and gave you some ideas on how to add color to deli and tissue paper. In my next video, I'll use some of these papers to create a collage or two. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Take care.